one of the things that Stephen Covey always talked about is that you've got to surround yourself with people that elevate your performance. We can't try to help people or keep them down. We've always got to be growing ourselves, but we've got to be willing to lend a helping hand, and that really is what win-win is about. When I win, if I can help you win, then we can take that next step and take it to the next level. But if I'm always trying to undermine something in the background, then, I mean, it's not going to be good for anybody.
Not at all. Not at all. So let's step back into when these win-lose scenarios typically start. There's some sort of a dispute between us, and now all of a sudden, here's this opportunity for when we can really demonstrate and live win-win versus the other way. And what I see all too often is people aren't being honest with themselves about the difference. And when we're having a disagreement, instead of actually listening to what you're saying and internalizing what you're saying, I'm often sitting here thinking up my defense. I'm thinking up my defense against you. I'm thinking up what I'm going to say to knock you down so I'm right and you're wrong, as opposed to actually hearing and trying to be honest and learn from what it is you're saying.
Right.
And so I see that all the time, whether it's an interaction amongst a team or with a patient who calls up upset, because the same thing applies. You know, the patient calls up upset, and instead of actually hearing what they're saying, we might be reacting emotionally, and understandably, it's an emotionally heightened scenario where everybody's excited and I'm being defensive, and it takes a great deal of courage to be willing to listen to what that person's saying as opposed to responding to it, inside my head even.
That's right.
So we need to step back a little bit and listen to what's going on. And you know, here's a metaphor that would apply really, really well to dentistry. You know, the minute you start saying stuff, you can't take it back, right?
Right.
And we all struggle with that. We understand it, but we don't believe it. So I went through this exercise with my kids a while back where I gave them one of these little sample tubes of toothpaste and said, squeeze out all the toothpaste on the table. And they squeezed it out all over the place. It was just a big old mess. They thought it was cool. And I'm like, all right, put it back in. And they were sitting there trying to, and of course you can't get the toothpaste back in the tube. Once it comes out, it's out. And the same happens with our words. Once those words come out, you can't take them back. The damage is done. It can't be reversed. You can try and make it better, but it's done. It's out. And so it's a fabulous metaphor for our interactions and the words and how harmful they can be, and the fact that once they're out in the open, they're out in the open.
It's a great metaphor, Darren, and I just want to say I wish you would have been my dad, because that sounded like a lot of fun. Who cleaned that mess up?
Yeah, I did.
You didn't bring the wife in and make the kids clean all of it?
No, that would have been a win-lose.
So here's a scenario I think I can share with you. When obviously I think you all know that Wally started a heating and air conditioning company when he knew nothing really about heating and air, and over his first 60 months in business went to $20 million in sales. I landed on Inc. Magazine's list of fastest growing companies. I was the general manager at that company for 5 years, and when I came on board, one of the things that we had was a tremendous amount of infighting going on. It was in year 2. We'd done $2 million our first year. We were in the midst of doing $3.5 million our second. And Wally didn't know anything about heating and air. My background wasn't heating and air. My background was sales and marketing. And I came in, and management. And when I came in, what happened was this scenario had developed between the install team that was actually installing the product into homes and the service team and the sales team. So you had these 3 different teams within the organization. The guys that were responsible for installing it once it was sold, the guys that were responsible for servicing once it was installed if something wasn't working properly. And what had happened was the sales guys are out there working Wally's system, busting their butt to sell the equipment. And then the installers, of course, they're so busy because the sales guys are selling so much and our company's growing so fast. And then because the installers were trying to move so quickly, we would have a lot of callbacks. And the service guys would have to end up going out in the middle of the night. Well, you can see the dichotomy that developed here. The installers were just pissed because the sales guys would miss something on the install, which they had to get out and rush and fix. Then the installers were rushing, and the service guys would have to come back in the middle of the night to fix something when somebody's air conditioner or heating wasn't working. So what I did was I started putting everybody in the same room. Once a week, we would do a company-wide meeting, and then we would have an install, service, and sales meeting only. And we put those guys in the room, and I can tell you, Darren, those first couple of meetings, they were not fun. I mean, literally, you felt like people were going to throw down and come across the table. But what developed over those next 3 or 4 weeks is we would say, all right, you've got to listen. You've got to listen to what this group in our organization, you've got to really listen to the problems that we're causing. Because the sales guys felt like, if I don't go out there and sell it, you wouldn't have anything to install, and then you wouldn't be making any money. And then the installers would be thinking, well, if I didn't install it, the service guys wouldn't have anything to go back and service. And the service guys would say, well, if I wasn't here to come and fix your mistakes, you'd be out of a job, right? So we had this, I mean, it was bad for a few weeks there. And then all of a sudden, when people started empathically listening, when they would listen and really figure it out, all of a sudden, you know what happened, Darren? Then all of a sudden, the sales guys would take an extra 15 or 20 minutes on a sales call. Once they'd sold it, once the prospect had signed the paperwork, then they would go back and they would do their measurements again, and they would make sure. Now, all of a sudden, the installers, they would be able to bring all the tools they needed to the job, all the materials, all the right equipment. Then guess what? They could do their job better, and now the service guys could swing by at the end of the day, and they could just do basically what we called a quality check. So now they're not out in the middle of the night. They go through, they check it out. Now all of a sudden these guys are all best of friends. They're showing up, they're drinking coffee together every morning of the week, and it only took about 3 or 4 weeks to develop that culture. But everything else had been underwriting that. It had been developing for a year and a half where these guys were getting mad. They really didn't like each other. So the way we solve that is we open it up with communication.